Welcome to another episode of Civic Cipher. I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
He is Ramses Ja. I am Q Ward. You are listening to Civic Cipher.
Yes, indeed. Very special episode today. We don't get to say that very often.
What's going on?
We are 2 years old today.
Well, I'm 40, but then so October.
I'm 42. You're right. You know what? I should probably re-say that. Well, the show.
Okay.
The show is 2 years old today.
Now I follow. Ico is 2. And then if you round up, because my birthday's coming up, I'll be like 41.
Yeah, there you go, man. So today we're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate a lot of what has happened in the past 2 years that we've been on the air. And we'll probably do a whole lot of thanking to you, our listeners, for supporting us. That's saying something to have a radio show grow this big and be sustained and fortified by a listenership, a base of people that just tune in every week to listen to what we got going on and what we want to talk about. And we know we deal with heavy topics and subjects and so forth. So to have that support and to just be championed by you means a lot to us. So stick around. We will be discussing again some of the more positive things that have happened as a result of all of our combined efforts, not just us but yours and other great organizations. So we're going to look at the progress there. We're going to also spend some time discussing Black media. Our show wouldn't exist if not for the starting point was the Freedom Journal, the first Black owned and operated newspaper in the United States. So we're going to spend some time talking about that as well. But, we like to start off with some ebony excellence. So Q, how's that sound?
Shall we?
We shall. This week's Ebony Excellence is sponsored by Hip Hop Weekly Media. And the story comes via Sports Illustrated. I think you might know what's coming. We are going to celebrate some more Black girl magic like we like to do around here by talking about Serena Williams. So I will read a bit. We knew it was time for the Queen GOAT, Serena Williams, to lay down her racket. She remains victorious in winning our hearts because she's the greatest of all time. 22 major championships later, several close calls for an additional title. Injuries, disappointments, marriage, and motherhood. It was a 41-year-old body to have the final scene. Many young Black girls have been watching her resilience and competitive nature, wondering if they could one day possess the heart of Serena Williams, and will forever look up to her. Congratulations, Serena Williams and family, especially King Richard, Queen Mother, sisters, brother, and of course, Venus. You all made many across the world extremely proud, from Compton to England, France to Spain, Africa to Australia. Williams family reigns women's tennis royalty supreme. Serena, please continue to hold court wherever you may be. You see, you're still our queen for forever and a day. Serena Williams, definitely the greatest of all time, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. For those who don't know, she has retired at the end of a very celebrated career. And she is the living embodiment of excellence, being committed to not just your craft, but to who you are, standing firm in the middle of yourself, owning your Blackness, championing your Blackness in spaces where it's sometimes difficult, challenging, etc. And if we can, we will take this moment to salute you, Serena Williams. You are absolutely ebony excellence. And if all goes well, the rest of the show is going to sound just like that. I know I'm excited because we don't often get to have sort of a celebratory tone around here. But again, turning 2 years old is really something special. I want to remind you that this show, we didn't expect this to happen. Right? We didn't expect to, we didn't have like a master plan, right, Q?
I mean, that's the part of the story that I stress the most.
Yeah.
Because of the way things worked out, it seems like some stroke of genius that we fled radio to start our own fledgling media empire. And it's like, no, there was no plan. There was no exit strategy. You know, we stood on principle, we stood on our compass, and made the decision that we had to make. And it's just by grace that things worked out.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a space now where, you know, celebrating 2 years later just seems really improbable because,
given how we started, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't even know if we've ever told this part of the story out loud, but I sat at Rams's dining room table and watched tears stream down his face as he said goodbye to not just a career. A lot of people have jobs and careers, but media, radio, and broadcasting was Ramses's life. And because our people were being misrepresented, and for what it meant to our culture that our home and radio told us no on the basis that what we were trying to do was black,
mm-hmm.
without hesitation, Ramses said no. And you guys have to understand there's a moment where it's like, yo, bro, did I make the right decision here?
Sure, yeah.
And I'm like, you made the only decision that you could make.
Thank you for that, Q.
You know what I'm saying? So that it worked out and that all these opportunities have presented themselves now. If you don't know that part of the story, it just looks like a stroke of genius. Like, man, that's dope what y'all did, how y'all went and started Civic Cipher and told them to, you know, that they knew what they could do.
Yes, like, no, we did not know that.
We had no idea.
You know, and for those of you who may not know the story, we tell the story from time to time, but for those who don't know, in brief, basically Q and I are broadcasters. We have a hip hop background. We're DJs. We work in radio. During the protests of 2020, we went to our old employer and says, hey, we'd like to do a show that really speaks to the issues on the street. There's some people that we'd like to interview, etc. And after some roundabout, you know, misleading conversations, they ultimately said that they didn't want to do a black show. And this is when we decided to leave on principle, as Q mentioned. And we resigned to the city rather than to the station. We wrote the letter to the city, just letting everyone know that this is why we would not be heard on the radio anymore. And what we were trying to do was for them, we were trying to give them an hour a week, just to, at that time it was a half hour a week, so that, you know, we could tell our own stories and we could challenge what, you know, Channel 12 was reporting as a riot, which wasn't a riot because, again, we were out on the street. You know, we felt the need for that. So, you know, to go from a moment where it's like, okay, this chapter of my life is over. All of the tickets I gave away, all the listeners that grew up listening to me on the radio, all of the, you know, I tried my best the whole time I was a broadcaster for that part of my career to not let that define me, to not let that become a part of my identity rather. But there's no escaping that. When you've done it for that long, it just it's second nature. It's as natural as breathing. And so
I've always been blown away every time you remind me, because you question that. Even like in the wake of that decision, you're like, man, that is a part of my identity. And it blows me away that you didn't want that, because I saw the time that you committed to being good at it. So I'm like, what is he talking about? Like, how are you going to do this well and it not be a part of your identity? It seemed, you know what I mean? Like, I watched you commit more hours than anyone to being good at that.
It's that Mamba mentality.
You know what I mean? I often told you, and I joke with you even to this day, it's like a magician watching you work in that space.
Yeah.
So that you commit that much time to being good at it while also hoping that it didn't become a part of your identity seemed.
You know what it is though, Q? So, and this probably is indicative of, I will say indicative of at least a facet of the Black experience in this country, at least. But I think it's also indicative of anyone's experience under capitalism, where you're in a corporate environment, you know, and you are at the bottom or in the middle, right? Or even at the top in some instances, but certainly the bottom and the middle. So going into radio, you know, 2005 was when I first got a chance to broadcast, and it was KKFR in Phoenix, which we're on now. So shout out to DJ Complex and my man Eric over there. We all go back. You. Yeah, we all go back. So anyway, yeah. But yeah, Complex, Eric Valdez, all these guys, they were doing power when I first got over there um, in '05. And so when you first get into radio, you realize how volatile the industry is. And there's lots of industries that are very volatile. Tomorrow's not promised in corporate America, period. We all know that layoffs happen. We all know, whatever. Well, radio is particularly, I don't know if insidious is the right word, but you get what I'm trying to say. So being the best kind of helps you to fortify your position, but it in no way guarantees a tomorrow. 50%, you might increase your odds by 50%, but it's not going to guarantee anything. And so I didn't want it to become a part of my identity because I knew that it could go away at any point in time, and I at the same time, I doubled down so that it would not go away. And then over time, it becomes a part of your identity. I say that to say that walking away from it was obviously very emotional. I've shed tears on this show before. So if you're a longtime listener, you know that this is a very emotional place. We have to tell real stories. We deal with life. We deal with death. We deal with heavy topics here. And so there's no shame in me letting you know that I obviously I lost it a couple of times, having to walk away from how I fed my family, made my family really proud of me and my friends and so forth, knowing that I would probably never talk on a microphone again. And I know that you felt the same weight of that, but I know you were kind of just moving with me, and I'll never, ever be able to thank you enough for supporting me. I know that you would, and just like I'd support you.
Yeah,
Q and I have been friends for 100 years. So.
There was no other version of it, though. There was no version where that decision was being made, in a vacuum with you by yourself. Like that was an us decision.
Sure.
That I'd been disappointed if you felt like you couldn't make the decision because you didn't know which direction I'd lean.
Yeah. But it's still important to say it out loud because, even though it's a given, it still represents a sacrifice on your end as well. And so while you're acknowledging that on my part, I want to make sure I say that for you. But, to go from essentially zero, well, maybe not zero, but, we had some people who they had come to know our names. But zero, no career, no, nothing, no promise of tomorrow, to now having a radio show that's on from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. We're as far north as, upstate New York. I think we're on a couple of stations in Vermont, so as far north as in Vermont. And it's, obviously we're as far south as San Diego. We crisscross the whole country now after 2 years, and obviously tons of support, most of which comes from our listeners, is extremely humbling, and we're really grateful. And this is a very invigorating time in our careers and in our lives, because now, rather than asking you to listen to the next commercial break and giving away concert tickets or doing celebrity gossip or things like that, we feel like we talk about things that really matter. Granted, it's heavy stuff, but again, we really feel like it matters. And there's another part of this too. And while we're here talking about this, I do want to say it. I'm not the most spiritual person in the world. That's not my way. But sometimes there are things that happen that kind of make me feel like perhaps I have some favor with some sort of higher intelligence, higher power. And obviously having, you, Q, and having such a storied career alongside you, our producer, Maggie B. Nolan, coming to the table and really helping lend that voice that we really needed in terms of writing our scripts, making sure that we account for things that we might have overlooked. We can't articulate the pain that a mother might feel. We can't, there's certain things we can't do. But there's some other things that really, in hindsight, makes me feel like this was sort of, there was some perhaps intelligent design behind this path. One of which is, you mentioned this is a really small thing, but it's not insignificant to me, is that we had a treasure trove of aesthetic elements that would really help us build out the show, frame it, and then sell it to radio stations. But I think a more important, more foundational thing that happened was, we've told the story before, so forgive me if you've heard it, but prior to us being told that our old station didn't want to do a quote black show, and it's a hip hop station, they didn't want to do a black show, huh? Prior to being told that, Q reached out to me. Once upon a time, I had not done a lot of traveling in the US, only international travel. And I had an opportunity to go with Q to help him drive back a car. I think we went to go get some fancy car that Q has. I don't remember which one it was. A Porsche. That was what it was. Anyway, it was in Florida. And of course, we're based in Phoenix, Arizona. And so he's like, hey, man, you want to fly with me and drive the car back? And remember, it's COVID at the time. No one's outside. It's a way to get out of the house and check off a few states, which now I've obviously been to all 50 states. I've famously talked about that on the show as well. But at the time, I had been to, 4 states or whatever. So this was a chance for me to, travel through the the southern part of the U.S. And coming back to the city, coming back to Phoenix, we were pulled over in Mississippi. And because remember, at the time, you got to think George Floyd had just gotten killed, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. The country is dealing with these in real time. And then we get pulled over in the middle of the night in the darkest back road in Mississippi on our way to Louisiana.
I need to add, just for those who are listening to us mentally, the darkest place that you thought of when he said that?
Nah, it was darker than that.
It was way darker than that.
There was no moonlight.
There was no moon. The trees were so big, and so the greenery around us was so dense that moonlight couldn't get through. Yeah, it was dark.
And then all you hear is that Mississippi accent coming from behind you. And we've told the story on the show, but anyway, this was an experience that Q and I both lived through. We went on, they pulled Q out of the car. Obviously the outcome, we're fine. They did it for no reason, but they pulled Q out of the car. We were pulled over for no reason, really. And certainly not enough reason to get taken out of the car. But I had my phone on Facebook, and I was doing a Facebook Live. And because we were bumping Outkast driving through Mississippi and Alabama, my battery was dead. So I'm on Facebook Live. Everyone sees there's police behind me. Everyone knows that we've been out protesting, this, that, and the other. They don't know that we're in Mississippi. They have no idea where we are. And, obviously, if something happens, we can't upload a video. So I got to go live. And then my phone dies. So all they see is Q walking backwards to the sound of a voice. And I'm in the car. And then they come and pull me out of the car. And I'm like, oh, God. And then my phone goes
as
off.
Ramses is getting pulled out of the car, the phone died.
Yeah, man, that was a scary time.
So needless to say, once his phone got some battery, it might have been 50 something messages.
Probably more than that. Yeah. People were very upset. But that served as sort of a foundational experience that helped us launch the show off. And so I say that there were certain things that felt like divine placements in our life. And, to whatever it is that has set us on this path, maybe it's a collective consciousness. Maybe there is something greater that we don't know about. That's not for me to speak on. I just want to take this moment to say that I'm very grateful to be able to share some of these things that I'm going to share with you that have taken place over the past couple of years. So without further ado, let's talk about some positive things since we've been on the air. So one thing that is, I think, very, very important and was very much pivotal is that Donald Trump was voted out, and he relinquished his post relatively peacefully. Relative. I know January 6th, but he could have did a lot worse.
He did not relinquish his post, and it was not peaceful.
Well,
okay, if I'm gonna do anything for y'all that can hear,
there was no civil war. That's what I'm trying to say.
Let that get off.
Okay.
He didn't relinquish.
Then you say it better than me. Go ahead, say it better.
It was not peaceful.
Well, either way, he's gone. How about that?
Amen.
And obviously, for us that subscribe to the notion that Black people are valuable and special and precious, and that our lives are valuable and our lives have worth. Donald Trump and really his base being sort of galvanized behind, reclaiming America and kind of getting off these strange, bizarre ideas about them, being replaced and, all this sort of strange stuff that puts a target on our back, Black people, brown people, anyone who's not white, Christian, heterosexual, that sort of person. To have him out of office, that's obviously a huge thing. And that has happened since we've been on the air. COVID, we had to deal with COVID, we had a few episodes.
We're still
dealing with it. But the worst of it, in terms of the numbers, the death numbers and so forth, that feels like it's largely behind us. And we had to do a couple of shows where we tried to do some convincing of Black people to really get vaccinated, and we had to take into account that Black people's history in this country, especially insofar as it relates to the government and the government performing, untested or, not fully fleshed out medical solutions on Black populations as a way of experimenting to kind of see what the effect on a human body would be before they release or alter formulas or whatever. I'm alluding to the Tuskegee experiments, which are harmful experiments that the United States government has documented performing on Black people, had to apologize for. And they were doing it just to see what the outcomes would be.
Yeah. I wish we'd have been a bit more well versed in that precedent, though, because it was kind of the opposite. They were denied treatment and things that in medicine.
Yeah, that was really what it was. Yeah, with the Tuskegee experiments. And
we were denying ourselves a life-saving vaccination based on,
as a result of
just
that,
very, very little information. The fears were justified. We just didn't do a lot of due diligence.
Right.
And a lot of misinformation was passed on to us very easily because of that.
But we're here on, like I said, on the other side of the peak of COVID. So that is something that I believe is very much a positive outcome. There's been a not insignificant amount of focus on policing. And obviously there's been some legislation that's been passed with respect to how policing is done or should be done in theory since George Floyd's murder. So before George Floyd, you have to remember there were police killings, police shootings. They were shooting children. It was, this sort of thing was happening. Black children was happening over and over and over again. We were paying attention to it. We did talk about that on the radio when we were doing Radio Solstice, our old show that we were doing. We talked about that stuff over and over again every time we could. And after George Floyd and after the sentencing of Derek Chauvin, we started to see some changes. So that was something that was positive. We still have a long way to go. I'm not going to pretend like it's all roses and all that stuff, but I'm grateful to have seen progress in our time on the air. And there has been some cities who have taken police resources, fiscal resources, and reallocated them. It's not a full defunding of the police, but it's
some cities unfortunately have doubled down.
And now, unfortunately, the president is talking crazy. But
which tries to take some of the juice out of us voting the other dude out.
Yeah,
this dude be tripping. And now we have to hope that we turn out again
to keep them there. It's
right.
Strange.
You know what I mean? Because it's been some very discouraging outcomes in the wake of the worst human being that's ever held. I can't say he's the worst human being that ever held the office, because I'm sure we had some
back in the day,
dippity doodahs back in.
Yeah.
But in my lifetime, the worst person, people get on the political side and the presidential part. I don't care how good or bad a president he was.
Sure.
He was an awful human being.
There it is. And, that I think that further shows why, the student loan thing was, I get that it helps folks. I just don't love feeling like it could be sort of a political tool to, bolster some some additional votes. But this is what we got, and it's better than what we could have had, in my opinion. So again, some more positive outcomes to focus on.